Welcome, everyone. I've lost count of how many web chats this is, but I think we're close to 10. And this is our first repeat web chat. Laird Schaub is with us for the second time, and we're excited about that. I want to say welcome to everyone on behalf of the Cohousing Association. I'm Karen Gimnig, and I am the Associate Director of the Cohousing Association. Karen Hoskins, our Executive Director, she had other commitments this evening and will not be with us, but is with us in spirit, and sends welcome to you all. Wanted to remind you, as always, that although we provide this service for free, it does come at a cost to the association. So if you are not already a supporter of the Cohousing Association of the United States, we encourage you to consider making donation, whether a monthly donation is our new Evergreen Neighbor category, or an annual donation, or from a community or from an individual. All of that helps us keep these kinds of programs going. And I just want to introduce Laird Schaub, who is, as you know, I think, decades of experience with intentional community and co-housing, and a fabulous supporter of co-housing and all that we try to do, particularly related to getting along with each other. And he's here tonight to talk to us about participation.
Thank you, Karen. As Karen said, I've been a consultant to communities of all kinds since 1987, so I've got a lot of years in the field. And the topic tonight of participation is the single most common topic I'm asked to help groups with. So it comes up frequently. People have the ideal and enthusiasm when they join community of everyone's going to have their oar in the water and pulling together. And it seems to be fairly clear how that's done financially. But tonight we're talking about the non-monetary contributions to community, and that tends to get messy. Doesn't turn out to be quite as even-handed as people thought. That's a fall from grace, and how to handle the unevenness of it tends to be the crux of the matter. So I'm going to walk you through some essentials around it that I've distilled from those years of helping other groups through this issue. I've got 5 different main topics I'm going to touch on. I should be able to cover that in 30 or 40 minutes and leave the rest of the hour for questions. I have handouts that I can give to you. You're going to have to send me an email. I don't know if we've got posted what my email address is. Karen, can you? Or I can just tell people it's Laird, my first name, @ic.org. And if you write and say, could you send me the handouts, I'll be happy to do that. But I'm gonna read from them to walk you through it, and it'll be too much material for you to, furiously copy. But you can get these in electronic form if you're there.
Laird, are you willing to have those posted on the website with the web chat?
I could do that. I can do that too. It's basically the thing that I would do if I was doing a workshop, and I would see that people had copies in the room. But we won't do it right now. But it'll be available through the website, or you can get it directly from me. Either way.
Great.
So what I've learned is that this is a good example of what I call a very complex topic, and that there's several angles on it. And one of the reasons it's a difficult topic is that people get bogged down in which question to address first, or some people say, well, gee, I'd like to know the answer to question 4 before I look at question 7. And there's legitimacy to that, but what you wind up doing is chasing your tail, and you get overwhelmed by too many questions. So I'm going to first give you the set of questions. Then the second segment of this is going to be, how do you approach a topic that has many questions? So that's what I call working a hairball. That'll be the second part. So the first part is, what are the questions? And it doesn't matter which order you do these in. I've just got them listed in some order. You can take them in any order you want. You should do them all. You'll also find that some of the questions, if you answer one way, then a subsequent question doesn't matter anymore, or aren't relevant in your situation. That's fine. Just skip anything that doesn't pertain. But let me walk you through the questions. First of all, do you have a baseline understanding that everyone should make contributions to the well-being and development of the community? Most groups would say yes, but some don't. Some say, no, that's not an expectation. It's up to you to be inspired to do that, and we don't really want you to feel any obligation, and we'll take what we get and go from there. That's a possibility. That's a real low structure possibility. But so the first question is there an expectation at all? And how would you describe it? All right. And usually we're talking about adults now. and everybody who lives in the community. I'll say something about different categories of membership in a bit. Second question is, do you want to quantify that expectation? Again, this is a question that some groups do and some don't. Some of them say 10 hours a month, or some people say, no, we don't want to put a number on it. We want each person to be inspired to give what they can. Everyone's expected to contribute, but we're not going to put a number on it. So that's up to you. Now, if you do want to quantify it, do you want to record contributions is a question. Do you want to have a record of it? Now, that's going to be, there's one of the spectrums that almost exists in almost all groups of size is, I will call, high structure and low structure people. And the high structure people will say, of course we want to quantify it. We want records. We want data. The data helps us plan. The data helps us know where we're falling short, where we have to pay attention, etc. Other people say, no, I'm on the low structure, and I find keeping records onerous. I find it is used as a way to get me in trouble, and I don't really like that. I want to be doing it as I'm inspired. It's a free will offering, and anything that minimizes bureaucracy is going to make my life better. Now, so I'm not saying there's a good and a bad side. I'm just saying that spectrum exists, and you have to navigate it. So, and naturally enough, some groups do record the hours, and some don't. So both examples exist. And then if you do have records, how are they available to the group? Does everyone get to see what everybody's contributing or not? All right, another point would be, what is the point of doing this labor? Now, on the one hand, it's to get the work done. That's the obvious question, but there's a secondary or another angle on this, which isn't always obvious to everybody, but can be very potent to discuss, which is to build relationships. That is, by working together, building the community, it's one of the ways you get to know each other. One of the ways that the community builds the fabric of the community. There are social events, but work events also is an angle on that. And for some people, that's a very comfortable angle. They feel more at ease when they're doing a plumbing project together, or when they're cleaning together, things like that. Or a lot of communities have work days specifically so that everyone's got this sense of, we are in this together doing this work, this voluntary work that's necessary to get the community where we want it and to do it in an affordable way. So building relationships can also be important. Now, this becomes very relevant, your answer to that question, that is the point of the work, when you get into things like, well, is it okay that people substitute dollars for hours? Some people have very busy lives, they have a flow of money, they don't have the time. They would rather pay so somebody else could be hired to do the work, and then it gets done, so they're feeling like they're meeting the need for the work getting done, but obviously that does not meet the need for building relationships. Writing a check is not the same thing as out there in the garden pulling weeds together or doing a clean shift together. So you have to know the answer to one question, so you know, well, what limitations, if any, do you want to place on dollars for hours if you allow it? All right. Another question is it okay for one member, one adult, to donate hours to cover for another? The most common way this comes up is in a household. You may have one person who has very little discretionary time and another that's got more, or they're more socially oriented, or for whatever reason, they're willing to do the full shift for the household, but it all's being done by one person, and then they're covering for the expectations of another. Is that allowed? I mean, this gets into another question of, are expectations per household or per adult? And I would, when you think of dues, usually that's associated with the household, or in many cases, it's related to square footage, is the way financial dues are, but often hours for participation are per adult. Although that's not the only way to do it. I'm just saying that's the most common way it's done. Okay. Another question is, can you bank hours? If you've gone through a period of time where you've done above and beyond what the expectation is, can you coast in the future while you run down your surplus? If so, what are the limitations on that? All right. Here's a big question is, what flexibility do you want to take into account given an individual's life circumstances? Almost everybody, all communities would say, well, yes, we want to be sensitive to the fact that somebody's in poor health, which could be either permanent or temporary. You could break an arm You can't do something for a while that's healing. Or you could be looking at cases of dementia or frailty in somebody who's getting older, or there's all kinds of disabilities that people can go through, and it's not just age related. So there's that question. And it's not just about physical limitations. It can also be you're in a high stress situation in your job, or you have a sick mother you're taking care of. There's all kinds of things, that life factors that limit your ability to actually do the things that you usually would be doing. And what are the limitations on that? To what extent, how do we recognize that? How do we extend grace to people who are not in a position to give, at least on a temporary basis? How do we define flexibility? Okay, now I'm gonna skip one here and come back. If you have children in your group, what are their expectations about them contributing? Obviously, you're probably not going to be looking too much from your 2-year-olds, but when they start to get to be 8 or 9, that's another answer. How about when they're 14 and 15? So there's age-related expectations. Some parents feel like children should be, have a stress-free environment until, the day they turn 21. Other people feel like, let's get them integrated into the community as early as possible. So there's not a right and wrong answer, but what are we thinking about there? What are the opportunities for them to be integrated into the participation in the community? And how does that relate to their age range? Another question is, in what way do expectations change by category of membership? Mostly I've been thinking all these things I've been saying about the people who are owners and live there, but what about renters? What about people who are absentee owners? What about people who are long-term guests? There may be associate members. Some communities have that category. It's worthwhile to walk through all the different categories and say, how does that impact our expectations about what it means to be a member in good standing in our community? What are we looking for? So spell that out. And then finally, something I put off till now that may have been the first question answered is, what work counts? Mostly people are thinking about raking leaves or pulling weeds in the garden or shoveling snow, cleaning toilets in the common house. Physical work, that's certainly part of it. The other two big categories that are often brought into play are governance. To what extent do you expect people to be on committees or take a turn in the barrel being the president, or whatever areas of responsibility there are necessary legal slots to fill? What is expected of members in the way of governance? And then the last piece would be social. And I'm not talking about showing up for a party. I'm talking about organizing the party, or the people who spend time carrying chicken soup around to people when they're sick, organizing support groups for people. Those are tasks, but they're done mainly for social reasons, not because that's generally recognized as work of the community, but it's all part of the fabric that builds the community. Then there's the question, even if you recognize those three categories, maintenance, governance, and social, do they count equally or not? That's a question. And again, this is one I can think of examples where some groups say yes, other groups say no. So you have to define what counts. Some people leave it up to the individual in the community, say, you use your own judgment about what you think is contributing to the community, and it's okay to count that. We may ask you to write it down so we know what it is or not, but we leave it up to you to decide that, rather than somebody else signing off on whether or not you fit your coloring inside the lines. Now, after having said all of those things, I'm going to add two more questions, both of which are important enough that I want to expand upon them. One of the aspects that's comes up with participation is tension over the unevenness of it. I alluded to that at the beginning of this presentation. You have to expect that it's going to play out that way. That is, some people simply have more time on their hands because they're retired, perhaps. They're well off enough financially. They're not worried about making money at this point in their life. Their children are out of the nest. Other people have young children at home. They're scrambling to make all the money work. They have very little discretionary time. People are in different stages in their lives. And so you're going to get different kinds of contribution from different households. And that's simply the way it's going to be. And the question is, how do you navigate that unevenness, which was not the picture people had when they came? They thought, well, we're all doing this together. And maybe everybody is, in the sense of their ability to do it, but it looks pretty different in terms of how many hours they're actually doing stuff. And so, and how do we recognize the reality of it and not have that lead to judgment? So what I call this is the martyrs and slackers conversation. that is on the one hand, the perception that those who are not really trying very hard or doing as much as others are labeled as slackers, and they're getting the benefit of those who are doing the work, doing it in a more regular way and in greater quantity. The other end of that, which is also a potential tension point, is the martyr end. And a martyr, it plays out this way, is they do more than their share, and then they believe that that gives them privilege as a result, meaning I should have more say in what happens in the community, or at least in my areas of responsibility, by virtue of my contribution, by virtue of my suffering. Here I am doing this extra time, and I'm taking a hit for the team, and now I want to get my pay for that, not in attaboys and pats on the back, or extra cupcakes on Saturday morning. I want my payback in decision-making and power when we were deciding what to do. And people go, whoa, dude, that's not what the deal was. I didn't promise that. I'm glad that you're doing that stuff, but I'm not, we didn't have a conversation about that transfers power to you. So if there's the perception that it's used that way, which may or not be conscious on the part of the participant, that can lead to tension also. So what I found is it's useful to think about participation in the kind of the same way as like going to the dentist. Every so often you got to go in and get your teeth cleaned. There's a buildup of dreck in the community and tension that starts to infect the area and the conversation about grumbling about either the slacker perception or the martyr perception. And so it's useful to get the group together simply to talk about things like, let's go around the room once and talk about what everybody's doing that they think is in support of the community. And one of the things you find out is often people don't know what others are doing. And so your perception that they're not doing much is slanted by the fact that you don't see what they're doing and are not aware of it. And then you have this story about how they're not doing much. And a great deal of that tension can melt away once you get a more accurate perception, of what they're doing. And then, or here's a thing that I've done many times in groups that's often been helpful. Ask what they're doing, and then also ask them on a very macro level, do you feel you are doing less than your fair share of the work in the community, about average or your fair share, or more than your fair share? And just by your own cognizance of what you think that means, without defining it any further than that. And I found that to be enormously useful in terms of, for instance, if I'm in tension with Karen about how much she's doing in the community, and then I find out she says, and I think she's slacking. That's my perception. And then she goes, and I don't think I'm doing my fair share. If Karen owns that herself, that makes the whole conversation go better. I don't need to tell her because she already gets it, If she thinks she's doing her fair share and I don't, I can listen closely to what she's saying she's doing, and I might change my mind. So we may not ever have to get to an awkward conversation because it got cleared up through the sharing of information that way. And so now I don't want to mislead you. What I just said to do could be very helpful. That's not going to eliminate all problems, but it can ease a lot of it and make the general conversation go better. So that's a technique I've used many times with groups. That might be something for each community to think about every so often, and I'm talking about maybe once every 2 years, you ought to have that conversation. And then we could talk about things like, well, was there anything in your life that if you got support from the group, you'd be in a better position to contribute more than you are now? It's not unusual for me to talk to, say, parents with young children who say, I can't come to the work days because I got to get my kids looked after. I can't abandon them, and it's not appropriate for them to come and be with me in the kind of work that's available. And then you find out there's another couple who's feels physically unable to do the work that needs to be done, but they'd be happy to look after the kids while that young couple can go out. Now everybody's got something they're doing that they feel better about, but they didn't know that was a need. And so you create an opportunity to find out, what could we do? We can't promise you we've got an answer, but if we don't ask the question, we might not know how we can make things go better. So the first piece I wanted to say is the importance of having a way to recognize the tension is going to accumulate, and you need to go in and clean it out every so often. Don't wait for it to just continually degrade relationships. Get in there and say, this is normal. We're not weird because there's tension. Let's clear it up and then move on and see what we can do better. And let's let go of the mistaken idea that everyone's going to contribute the same amount. It's never going to be that way. So what the things you want to do is have a baseline that you're looking for people to contribute with opportunities for flexibility, and you want to make room for and you want to appreciate anyone who's in a position in their life to give more when that suits them, when that fits for their life, but never so much that it leads to resentment. It should, stop short of that. Don't give any more than you can freely give and feel at peace with, without the expectation that you get extra privileges as a result. What you get is the satisfaction of serving because you're doing something you believe in and you have the motivation, you have the skill, and it gives you pleasure to give. That's what we want to encourage. So you do want to depend on people giving above and beyond, but never so much that it crosses the line into resentment or martyring. Okay. The other piece, so I wanted to mention that. I'm going to mention one more piece. I've already said something about the martyrs and slackers, which you will notice if you listen to my earlier web chat was on conflict, which kind of relates to that. Where there is tension in the room, how do you work with it? So you might refer back to that as preparation if you want to do one of those martyrs and slackers conversations. The other piece I wanted to mention is I want to talk about the possibility, which not many groups have, but I think is very potent here as a potential, and I do a lot to advocate, of creating a participation committee whose job it would be to go around periodically to all the members and residents, this would be renters too, in the community and have a conversation with, so let's talk about what's needed in the community and in the way of ways that you could contribute, and what's the intersection between the community's needs and what you would like to do and your skills, what you have time for. So I want to learn about your situation in firsthand way, not assume you're like just everybody else. You're unique. What would be the fit for you? And they would try to match make between, because a lot of times non-participation is a contributing factor is they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go or how to find out about stuff, and it's awkward maybe for them to initiate. So if the participation committee in a kind of a gentle couple people go around, sit down, have a cup of coffee in somebody's house, they can find out the answers to those things in a pretty non-threatening way. And it's very important that the tone of their work in the community is they're not the work police. They're not people who are there to judge. They're not there. They don't have any power to make anybody do anything. They're there to grease the skids. They're there to make things easier. They're there to work behind the scenes to see that there's good matchmaking. So teams or committees that are short-handed for something or need special things, they can go to this committee and say, we're short here, and our efforts to find people to fill these slots haven't worked. We need help. And then they can keep that in mind when they go around and have conversations. The end result of it may be, hey, you know what? We're short in this area. We have a collective problem. We have to figure out either we hire it out, we do without that work, we train somebody in the community to learn how to do it. We'll have to have a different answer. And it's nobody's fault. It's just a group issue. On the other hand, the participation committee may solve it, and you may not even have known it was an issue because you don't need to make it be everybody's issue if you can solve it on a lower level. And the participation committee could be that group. So, so I want you to think about that. I want to spend a little bit more time on those. So I've gone through a list. I think if you went through that whole list of questions I gave you and had answers, and the order in which you do it doesn't matter, you would have a pretty robust participation understanding. How would it work in our community? These are our answers. This is who we want to be. This is how we want to do it. And so I recommend that set to you. Now, I promised you at the beginning, the next piece I wanted to go into was working a hairball. So what I want to say about that is a complex topic is what I mean, where you've got many questions. What I find is the best strategy is pick the one that stands out to you as the most pressing, most foundational, begin there, and then answer that. And if you, in the process of answering it, somebody says, well, before I give you my answer to this, I want to know the answer to another question, don't go there. Instead say, suppose you have a good answer. I don't know what it is, but suppose you have a good answer to this other question. What is your answer to this one? Do the best you can on the question at hand. Don't leave it until you've gotten everything you can. Stop, then go to another one. And just keep your working your way through the whole thing with partial answers. I mean, you got an answer to this question, this one, this one. Pretty soon you'll get through the whole list. Pretty soon it may take several meetings. I don't want to fool you on this. But once you get done, then you can take a moment to say, all right, how does this hang together as a whole? Does the whole thing now make sense after we've answered all these questions? And you may make adjustments for all the parts to fit, but you'll answer that way. And if you try to do the whole topic in one go, where people can dance around from question A to G to K to see and back and forth. At the end, you'll feel like we didn't actually answer any of the questions, and we've got all these, conflicting lines and arrows going all over the map, and we really don't know what we got out of it. And then that's a debilitating experience. You've had a lot of conversation and people said a lot of things, but it's hard to know what it adds up to. So I find by breaking it into chunks, doing your best with one question at a time, and then aggregating an answer that way, you can work through the most complex topics. So that's working a hairball. That was the second piece I wanted to give you. And now I want to go to, I want to say a little, I'm not going to, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through the whole, I have a whole draft mandate for what the participation committee what would be its marching orders if you had it, and this will be something I can give you in a handout. So I've thought about this quite a bit, but the essential piece I said earlier that I'm underlining now is this is a volunteer, this is it doesn't have power to decide anything. I think it would be good for this group to have a state of the participation report that it produces every year saying, this is how we're doing at meeting our own needs. This is our shortfalls. This is what we have to keep a lookout for, that kind of thing. But they would operate behind the scenes. And there would be a commitment from the membership to, if the participation committee knocks on your door, you got to answer. You can't say, go away, I don't want any. You have to say, I'll have a conversation with you to talk about, I want to listen to what the community's needs are, and I'm willing to talk about what my interests are and see where the intersection is. And that's all you're really promising to do. You're not promising to do a certain thing, but it's trying to be a positive attitude. Let's find the fit here. Because most people, in my experience, want to contribute if they can find something that works in their lives. And you just have to find out what that is. And that's not something you need to do in a plenary where you're listening to everybody do that. I think you want it in the least threatening and easy way to do it. And I think this is a very friendly way to do it. And would go a long way toward eliminating some of the tensions that accumulate through lack of knowledge or misunderstanding around participation. I'm going to say one more thing, and then we can stop and go to questions, which is I want to talk about the importance of how you select people who would. Let's assume you've got fire in the belly for a participation committee. You like the idea, and I hope you do. Then there's a question of how would you fill that committee. The default method for most of us, we have more ideas of ways people could serve either on committees or as managers or different things like that, then we've got people available to fill them. So it's always a stretch for how do we fill our slots? And so for the most part, you're looking for volunteers when they come up. Who's motivated in the spur of the moment to get on this committee and do something? You see a show of hands and you take the first 4 hands and you're done. Now, there's a number of committees that may work for, but sometimes you have a committee where it's very important that there's a lot of balance and trust that the community, that committee is going to represent and hold the whole very sensitively. They show good discretion. They know what to share and what to keep as a private conversation. They are not very reactive. Then we've got people available to fill them. So it's always a stretch for how do we fill our slots? And so for the most part, you're looking for volunteers when they come up. Who's motivated in the spur of the moment to get on this committee and do something? You see a show of hands and you take the first 4 hands and you're done. Now, there's a number of committees that may work for, but sometimes you have a committee where it's very important that there's a lot of balance and trust that the community, that committee is going to represent and hold the whole very sensitively. They show good discretion. They know what to share and what to keep as a private conversation. They are not very reactive. They can listen to people's stories and not lose it because somebody else is in distress. There's different qualities you want. And I think this participation committee is an example of that. You want some good people in there that represent balance, where almost everybody in the community would feel somebody on that committee is easy to talk to for them. And that they're meeting and they're trying to think about the well-being of the community. They're not driving a personal agenda. They think strategically, all those kinds of things. I don't have to tell you what all the qualities are, but when you have a committee like that where sensitivity is going to be pretty important, you want to be more deliberate in the selection process. And so I'm going to take just a moment here to talk about a method that I think can work well, which is you take you say, all right, these are the qualities we want. Suppose you have a conversation and you delineate, this is what the job is, and these are the qualities and the people that are serving on it. Then once you've delineated that, you ask everybody in the community who thinks they've got these qualities and has the time and interest in doing this job. And from that, a number of people will opt out. The problem, people say, I'm not interested in that, or I don't think I'm an appropriate person for whatever reason. They don't have to explain it. They can freely drop out. So you have a winnowed ballot at that point of those left who feel they could do it and would like to do it if they were chosen. From the people who opted out, pick 2 people to be a ballot committee that is, they are not on the ballot themselves, but they are in the community. They've opted out, but they're going to do the ballots. And so what you do then, distribute a written ballot to everybody in the community, and then everyone with a certain period of time, 72 hours or whatever you say, you got this amount of time to check everybody on this ballot that you think would be acceptable to you on the committee. You can check everybody's name on that list or nobody's name, whatever you want to do. Everybody who's a member of the community gets 1 ballot. And then they check as many as they do and they hand it in to the ballot committee, or they put it in a box and only the ballot committee gets to look at it. Then once that balloting is closed, the ballot committee simply goes and looks and tallies them all up. And the person who gets the most, suppose you got 3 slots I'm making up a number. You pick however many you want on the committee. The person who gets the most votes is on the committee. You announce that to them, and then you look down at the next list, and then you go to the person who's number 2. You go to the first person and say, the next highest vote getter on this was so-and-so. Are you willing to serve with them? If the person who was the top vote getter says no, they skip that person and go to the next person because chemistry matters in these committees. You have to be able to work together. And so you go down until you've got the 3 people needed that are all okay with each other. They become the committee. This isn't for review and rubber stamp by the plenary. This is the committee. That's the decision. The vote is the decision. And the ballot committee simply announces it, and then the ballots are destroyed, and the ballot committee is dissolved. They agree not to say anything more about what was on the ballots. And they don't know who they were from. I mean, they just are taking them in and taking them in, and then announcing the result. And I have found that doesn't take that much time to do, and the quality you get from that committee that is selected through the thoughtful delineation of what's wanted and who's got those qualities is great. I've heard only good results from people willing to do that. Now, you don't need to do this with every committee, but sometimes, like for instance, if you had a conflict resolution committee, I would say that's another one you want to do with a lot of care. Don't just ask for volunteers. Be more deliberate in it, because it's really important that this committee delivers the goods in a way in line with what you're expecting from it. So I'm going to stop there as an overview of this very important topic and some of the things I've learned, and see what questions we've got. Karen, you got some stuff for me?
I don't yet. So we'll look out. Oh, and there it appears.
All right, here we go.
So the first question, which is from Gray Rock, is what about the tension between what a worker or team is willing and able to do and what other community members want done, or how other community think the work should be done?
Okay. Well, there's 2 parts. One is taking on a job or an aspect of a job that you think falls within the bailiwick of a committee, but the committee balks at it. They don't want to take that on. Well, I think it doesn't work to force it down their throats. So, I mean, I think you're going to have to navigate it. You have to find a different solution. Some other group or other body is going to have to do that work, or you'll have to talk about how badly do we want to do this work if nobody in the community wants to do it. Then that becomes a group issue. So I think you can labor a little bit with the committee, but gee, it would be really nice if you did this. I mean, you're doing plumbing in every other building. Why aren't you doing the plumbing in the common house, or whatever the thing is? There might be some illogic to their answer, but I would not push somebody to if you make somebody do work they don't want to do, you're not only going to build resentment, but you're not going to get very good work. So I would say it's a losing proposition. So that may be frustrating to you that the committee doesn't take it on, and it's okay to propose it, but if they're unwilling, I would not push. I would say, let's solve it another way. Now, I want to take on the other part of the question too, which is if you're not satisfied with the quality of the work, probably the best answer is to get on a committee. I mean, if you want to be a critic of somebody else's work but are not willing to do the work yourself, that's going to be uphill. I think there should be a way to have feedback if you think something's unsatisfactory. But in the end, if they're not willing to change, if the committee's not willing to change their work habits to something that's more satisfactory, they might be. I don't know. But if they aren't, then I think your best answer is to get on the committee and then do it yourself. Otherwise, I mean, one of the things is you're going to have to be able to allow people to do things their way, and it will not always be your way, especially when they're doing it on your behalf. But they need some latitude to do it in a way that they feel. Well, let me back up a little bit. Whenever you set up a committee, there should be a box which the plenary describes for what are they going to operate within, and that can include standards of quality of how they do their work. You could specify, we need the floor cleaned once a week or whatever it is, or if it's a kitchen floor in the common house, it may be every night after it's used or whatever. And then if it gets down to being a problem, you may have to get more specific and say, it should be possible to go in the morning and not see dirt in the floor or whatever that thing is you think is not being met. You can get more specific if you need to be. Start with something that gives people a lot of latitude and doesn't treat them like idiots. However, if it turns out that wide latitude is too wide, then you have to go in and narrow it down. And beyond that, I think you have to go in there and do it yourself, or live with the fact that different people do it differently.
Henning asks, would you care to comment about your selection technique as opposed to sociocracy's election process?
My understanding is that with sociocracy, there's an emphasis of we will decide this in a meeting, and some names will be put forward, and then people will talk openly about the pluses and minuses of that candidacy. In my experience, the relative maturity of us, despite what we might hope for, to be able to say openly critical things about other people in an open room is extremely limited. And I find the sociocratic method to be extremely naive if it expects to deliver a full-throated, let's look at that person's candidacy and what qualities they bring or liabilities they bring to that job. It's not so much about the appreciations or the good things, but can they openly say the things where they have reservations? I think that's like juggling lit sticks of dynamite in most groups. Now, I think we can aspire to that level of open feedback, but I would say in 30 years, I've maybe seen that twice. I mean, that's how rare it is. And so I think it's just naive to assume that we've achieved that. So the method I've given, while it's a secret ballot, at least that's something that's rooted in a democratic form. And I am much more confident that the thing I said will produce consistently good results. Otherwise, it's more like a beauty contest in the sociocratic method, and we don't need that.
Okay, and Janice, I see your raised hand. There were a few other questions first, so I will get to you. Susanna asks, what if you don't get more volunteers than you have slots on your committee?
Well, then that's an issue, isn't it? I mean, the question is, how badly do we need this committee? How badly do we need this work? And if we don't have people that want to do it, we've got one of three choices. We either change our expectations and do without. We'll have to manifest enthusiasm where there wasn't any initially, or we're going to have to pay to have it done. Those are your choices. And you'll have to have that conversation. It's a group issue.
Okay, Melanie wants to know, what about how certain people value what they contribute? For example, some people like to compare in hours, but sometimes effort is just different. Sure. Like some people maybe do mediation and others do cleanup. Right,
that's where I mentioned under what work counts. It's really apples and oranges and bananas kind of conversation. Is an hour's worth of time shoveling snow equal to an hour's worth of committee time equal to an hour's worth of organizing a party or a birthday party for somebody? That's a good question. Do you value those things equally? Because we tend to value what we do or what we see, and we tend to discount those things which we don't participate in, don't get benefit from, etc. And so that you really need to talk about what counts, and then what latitude you give people to decide for themselves whether they're inside the line or outside the line. Most people don't want to be in a position where they are either judged by others as to whether or not their contribution counts, or judging others about whether their contribution counts. It's uncomfortable on both ends. So the more you can do to spell it out or allow latitude for personal discretion, the easier that's going to become. But you definitely are going to have a situation where you're comparing unsimilar kinds of contributions, and you'll have to talk about it.
Okay, Janice, you had a hand up. Do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, no.
Oh, I wondered what you might say about someone who lives in a community but travels a lot. Have you run across that?
Yes. In fact, at this point, it's hard to show me something I haven't seen. But so in that case, that one I mentioned one of the key questions is different categories of membership. So this is a version of that. This person who is, got one foot in the community and one foot out. How does that, in other words, while they're away, and if it's, and we're not talking about vacation for 2 weeks a year. We're talking about maybe they're paying half the year some other place and half the year at home. Let's say suppose it's like that. Then you have to have a conversation. All right, how do expectations of contribution, participation change when you're away? I mean, obviously you can't be a part of work days, but you still own a unit, and is a renter covering that work for you? Are you going to contribute dollars with which that labor could be hired out? What's fair? I mean, I think you have to talk about it and define how does the expectation shift when they're not on campus.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So from Vicki, how do we address the concerns some community members have that if someone hold them accountable, that is somehow a problem, or that someone is being rule police? Our community struggles with agreement sometimes because they are seen as rules and therefore not okay.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that's a good one, and certainly a common one. And so this ties back to the thing I said earlier about people who are high structure and low structure. And so the high structure people like data. They like people recording things. They like spelling things out as clearly as possible. That creates safety and ease for people on that end of the spectrum. For people on the low structure end of the spectrum, those same things are a straitjacket. They think, oh, that treats us all as the same, and we're not the same. And I feel like I'm being watched, and this stuff is being accumulated so that I can be held accountable. I will be shamed or put in the penalty box as a result of how there was an indiscretion on my part. Okay, so you'll have to talk about that tension, A. But B, it's also got to be possible. And this ties back to the comment I made earlier about selecting process and how we do with feedback. Mostly we come out of a culture where we don't learn how to do feedback very well. And so we bring the conditioning with us into the community experiment. In the long run, you're going to benefit from learning to be as open and honest with each other as you can. However, that's not a simple journey, and that's serious. That can be tough work, and I own that. It can be very valuable for you in the group the more you can get to honest expression. But so there's holding accountable means like I've got a problem. One person in the community's got a problem with something somebody else did. Now, in the area of participation, it could be they're perceived to be failing to keep a commitment, to do something by a certain date, or to do it well enough, or to do as many hours as we've agreed to do. All of those things are, so they think, oh, you've broken agreement, you failed to meet a commitment. There's got to be a way to talk about it that doesn't, it may immediately trigger for the recipient who's hearing this, I'm being judged, I'm being, this is the moment I hate, I didn't want to be in this, and so I don't ever want to do this to somebody else or whatever. But what happens is it doesn't go away if you don't talk about it. Now it happens in the parking lot. Now it happens on the side. People talking us because they're not talking to you, because when they talk to you, it goes badly. And so they're nervous about that, but it's still impacting relationships. It's still degrading trust, and the work's still not getting done. So it's all of this is an accumulation of this dreck. So I'm trying to give you high motivation to have the courage to say the thing. However, learn to say it as gently as you can, but still as honestly as you can. One of the things that will help with this, I'm not going to guarantee success. I'm not that foolish, but you can say, I want to talk to you about a problem I'm having that's coming up for me, about something you didn't do, and I want to set it up to work. Is this a good time to do it? You want to set up another time? Do you want somebody else to be present? What will work for you? I think it's going to be it's good for the community to have the expectation that it supports those conversations happening, and will do whatever it's needed to make that go better. However, you can't just say, I don't want to hear from you what your reaction is to me. You need to hear that information. It does not mean you have to agree with their perception. It doesn't mean you have to admit you did something wrong. It doesn't mean you have to change your personality. However, you want to clear it up, whatever the tension is. You want to care. You want to listen. You need the information, you can decide what weight to give it. And so if you do anything to discourage people from approaching you through defensiveness, through a high armoredness, through attacking them in return or whatever, I want to encourage you to try to work on, we have got to make it possible where this information is flowing, because it's really hard on the social fabric of the community when these conversations don't happen. And it's going to be much better if it's directly than indirectly. And you know, what I was talking about, the parking lot conversations and the gossiping that can fall out because they don't know where to go with it. So this is a tricky one, but I would say you'll need to talk about, well, what is our commitment to feedback to each other about how we're perceived to be functioning as members of this community, and what can we do to support that going well? I've sometimes done rounds in groups where I ask them, okay, how do you like to be approached with critical feedback? And you'll find that if you did a round and listened to people's answers, it would be all over the map. Some people would say, I want to hear it only one-on-one. I want to hear it in email. Other people saying, or I want time to think about it and get myself prepared to hear it. Other people say, as soon as I know about it, I want to know it immediately. Some people say, I want to hear it in the whole group, where there's safety of the group to protect me in case this turns into an attack. Other people say, I'm completely overwhelmed by hearing it in the whole group. I want it just one-on-one. Some people say, I want to hear it in the form of a joke. And you think, what? And it's because, well, that's the way we gave feedback to each other in my family growing up, and that's what I'm used to. So it's amazing what people's answers are. And in the end, what you want to do is try to give people what they want, you know, in terms of the mode of the communication. But you need to protect the honesty of the feedback and then be available to listen to the response and work it out. It's not a simple journey, but it's well worth doing. Okay.
Okay. So the next question is related, and you may have said all you want to say about it, but I'll read it out in case you have more. Building on Vicky's question, how do you differentiate between holding to account and shaming? It seems like the folks in our community who dislike recording and accountability claim that any attempts to move in this direction are shaming, which makes it hard to move forward.
Of course, no one means to be doing shaming or wants to support it. But then the question if you've got people who don't seem approachable or who immediately go into it, I would ask the question, okay, if somebody's got a problem with something you're doing, how do you want that to go? What avenue exists for you that won't automatically trigger shaming? I mean, you got to give me something. You can't say, oh, I never do anything that somebody won't have a problem with. That's not realistic. So give me something. And then try to work with their answer rather than guess and have, oh, you stepped on another landmine. You know, I mean, you can ask them. And now I don't know what they'll say, but, and you know, we may be talking about probably pretty bad experiences growing up and you know, probably live in the house of shame is where they came out of. And so they're very sensitive to it. All right, find that out. You know, do you remind them of their father or whatever? I mean, how can you shift your delivery that can stay away from their triggers? I mean, the important thing is the transmission of the information. Not that it gets to be your way. The object here, the goal here is a communication and solving a problem. So ask them what avenue they'll give you.
Okay, I'm hearing some thanks, and that helps. I don't see another question, so I get to ask one.
Okay.
So my question is around, I have an idea about including everyone, meaning including very small children and even infants in workdays. And I'm wondering if you've seen groups that have that policy as a valuation of every human being kind of concept.
Well, I like it too, Karen. I don't know about 2-year-olds, but I think I think it's okay for that be in the milieu as long as they're safe. I think generally below a certain age, you need some adult eyes on the kids really rather than on something else. But that should be easy to arrange. They can be in the same environment, I think is fine. You just have to have realistic, you have to keep changing. As any parent will know, you're constantly going through an adjustment where you're basically giving the kids more and more latitude to exercise judgment within the boundaries that if they make a mistake, it's not too dangerous. And so you have to keep changing it with the idea that you're working yourself out of a job eventually. And so I think, though, the earlier you can incorporate children is not a special category that we venerate and put on, and we have this safe environment where you can do whatever you want. I think it's better to say, no, you're a human being too, and we want to train you to be a contributing member to the community. Is a great model. Adults do that here, and adults is, so we're going to have expectations of you like we do of adults, but appropriate for your age and capacity. And so I've had great success starting from at least as early as six and up to have a conversation with them. Well, how would you like to contribute? And then when the kids are given real choice rather than just assignments, they have pride in what they do. And whether it's setting the table before dinner, or there's all kinds of things that kids can do. And then it gets more and more robust as they get older. And not only that, but a lot of adults like to teach. So there can be ways that this can work very well. And there's a lot of excitement I've found when kids are really are thoughtfully included in the work days. It works easier if they're working at the same time the adults are working. It's harder if the kids alone are working while you set the table, but we're out drinking on the patio. It's a little harder to sell,
Yeah. Okay, we have one more question, and probably after that we'll call time, but
okay, sure.
If our community hasn't addressed participation levels much in the past, where's a good place to start?
Don't feel alone.
She says, where's a good place to start since this hasn't been a norm for over 20 years? Well,
I mentioned at the beginning, this is the most common thing I'm asked to work on. Probably what'll motivate you is if there's issues. If things are going well, who cares what you're doing? Keep doing it, if it's working well. But if you have issues and you haven't talked about it, it's not too late to go back and get clarity where you didn't have it before. You can, don't lament. There's no use crying over what happened before, that water over the dam. Take it where you are. You can still use everything I gave you today for a community that's 20 years old or a community that's just starting. It's still just as valuable. You'll have more informed data. Your answers will be, well, I know what I want. And it'll be more informed now because you have the experience of what the ambiguity has cost you. In many cases, those questions I gave you at the front end of this workshop were really, they are not, oh, there's a right answer, I hope you figure it out. It's more like I can think of examples that can work on either end of that, but have it be your answer and you'll be fine. The hard part is when you don't have an answer. And then the uncertainty undercuts. Then somebody thinks, oh, I know what we should be doing. And then they judge others based on an answer or criteria that's never been validated by the group. And that's a nightmare.
Okay, I think we're going to sneak in one more, which is how do we address people in the community who don't participate at all or don't come to meetings or work days?
Well, I would say that the number one thing to keep in mind here is go to their house and knock on the door and say, I miss you. I'm not, I miss you at the meetings. I miss you on work days, and I want to know what's going on. I just want information. And you may find that the answers can be all over the map. They could be, my life is too busy. I don't have the bandwidth to do it. I came to a meeting once and I was embarrassed and I felt belittled in the meeting and I swore I'd never go back. And people, nobody knows that, but this person has been sitting on it for 2 years. I'm making up answers, but that's something I've actually heard before. The way to find out is to ask them. Go door to door and say, can we have some time to talk? I want to hear your story. I don't feel connected to you. I'm missing you in the group activities, and I'd like to know what's going on. Maybe there's a way that this could be improved. Because it's better for me when everybody's doing stuff, and I don't know if that's possible or not. I'd like to know. So you're there to listen and not tell them what they ought to be doing, but listening to why the offerings as they understood them aren't working for them. And there may be an answer, there may not be. Maybe you just have to get to acceptance. Okay, this isn't your tribe. You feel stuck here, whatever that thing is. But that's where I would start, rather than guessing why they're not there. Okay.
Okay. I can never leave one last question. We've started allowing people to contribute money when they self-select that they don't share work. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's okay. It gets back to this question of, to what extent are you relying on work to build social connection? It's certainly not the only way can be done. A person can be very well integrated in the community and still be very busy and prefer to pay money. You just have to have a rate that's set so that you can reasonably translate those dollars into getting the work done, either through hiring somebody outside or even hiring somebody inside. That can be a creative solution. You can have people who are, just barely able to reach the bottom rung on the affordability ladder in your community, and they would welcome a chance to get some part-time work in-house. If they have the skill, that may be a good fit. So that can actually work pretty well. But be clear about it. Have a conversation. Talk about it. Maybe you want to set some limits on it. Maybe you can only do half of your work that way or whatever, so you still get some engagement. It's probably going to be funky if you've got a third of the people paying money and then all the work being done by the other 2/3. That'll I'm not sure that'll play out very well, but allowing some of that's probably just fine.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been every bit as useful as I expected.
It's my pleasure.
Oh.
Okay.
And thank you to everyone who came. A few little public service announcements. Laird, I believe we're going to see you in Portland. This is true, yes?
Oh, yeah. I'm doing lots of things in Portland.
Wonderful. So hopefully we'll see many of the rest of you there. The Portland Conference, and this is the National Cohousing Conference that happens once every 2 years. It will be in Portland. The last 2 days of May are the pre-conference, and the first 2 days of June are the conference. And registration is now open. So we would love for you to register early. That helps us out. You get a little bit of a discount. And you never know, intensives and tours and things have been known to fill up. So get your registration.
Are you hoping, how big a crowd are you hoping for?
I am not on that committee. I think around 400, but
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I've been at every one since 2001. I really recommend it. The energy is just terrific. And you meet amazing people, cousins and relatives you didn't know you had, and all trying to do the same thing more or less. And it's a networking orgasm, basically. There's incredibly good people, and you can learn a whole bunch in a short period of time.
Wonderful. I'll take that clip and put it on the website.
You're welcome to it.
Thank you. So yes, Portland, Oregon, someone asked. So Portland, Oregon, the cohousing.org website will get you to the conference. It will also allow you to donate in support of this program and conferences and all the things that the association does. And the recording of this, I've got a busy weekend. I'm probably not going to get it up before Monday or Tuesday of next week, but it will go up. Watch the website, and we'll have the next one. I didn't look it up, so check the website for the next web chat, but it will be next week. And we will look forward to seeing you then. So thank you much. Any last words, Laird?
No, thanks, Karen. I enjoyed doing it.
All right. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.
All right.